The floorboards of the fourth-floor walk-up on Bleecker Street protested under the weight of Carter Thorne's bespoke leather loafers. His eyes, cold and clinical, performed a slow inventory of the small apartment. The second-hand velvet couch, the peeling paint, the faint but persistent smell of linseed oil. He inhaled, a calculated sneer curling his lip. "Well, Mia," he purred, the condescension smooth as old whiskey. "This is cozy." He'd come to confirm his narrative, that Mia Vance was nothing without him. He thought he saw failure. He had no idea he was standing on the stage where his entire life, built on greed and ego, was about to be obliterated by the very woman he tried to bury. The air in the tiny Greenwich Village studio was thick with unspoken history and the sharp, medicinal scent of turpentine. Carter Thorne, sleek in a $4,000 charcoal suit, looked utterly alien against the backdrop of artistic chaos. His presence alone was an intrusion, a physical manifestation of the gilded cage Mia Vance had recently escaped. "Cozy," he repeated, letting the word hang in the stale air, a deliberate barb dipped in pity. He didn't wait for a response, instead performing a slow, contemptuous sweep of the room. It was an inventory of what he perceived as her complete capitulation to failure. The sight of the mismatched coffee mugs, the cheap, functional desk lamp, and the large canvas covered by a dust sheet, evidence of the delusional hobby he had always mocked, was clearly a balm to his enormous ego. Mia watched him from the makeshift kitchenette, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug of lukewarm herbal tea. She didn't offer him anything. The lack of hospitality was a small, silent act of defiance, her only armor against the psychological warfare he had come to wage. 6 months. It had been 6 months since the divorce was finalized, 1 year since he had packed his designer luggage and abandoned their sprawling Upper East Side townhouse. His parting shot, the one that still echoed in her memory, was declaring her burgeoning art career an unforgivable betrayal of the corporate hostess role he had assigned her. "It's a workspace, Carter," Mia replied, her voice steady and low. It was the calm of a deep ocean trench, hiding the tectonic shift happening beneath. "It's exactly what I need right now." He gave a short, judgmental laugh, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Right. Your art." He flicked a dismissive hand toward the covered canvas. "Still chasing that pipe dream, I see. I thought you'd have moved past the dramatic suffering artist phase by now. Gotten a real job, maybe something in PR. You were always so meticulous about planning my firm's holiday parties." Every word was a sharpened dart aimed at the old scar tissue. Mia remembered 10 years of this psychological attrition, her award-winning paintings relegated to the freezing attic, her artist friends deemed crass, her dream of a gallery sneered at as a vanity project. He had wanted a polished accessory, a decorative hostess to stand beside the rising star of Thorne Global Real Estate. He had never, ever wanted a partner. "I'm happy here," she stated, a simple truth that appeared to physically annoy him. "Happy," he scoffed, walking over to the single window, which offered a magnificent view of a brick wall and a rusted fire escape. "Don't lie to yourself, Mia. You were never good at it. You're happy with this, after the Central Park panorama you had?" The view from the townhouse alone was worth millions. "I remember the view, Carter," Mia conceded, taking a slow sip of her tea, delaying the visceral urge to scream. "I also remember feeling like I was in a cage, even with all that space." The reason for his visit, he'd claimed in a curt email, was to drop off a final sheaf of documents, a lingering legal tie from their shared poisonous life. The manila envelope, thin and already signed by Mia, sat innocently on the counter. But the documents were complete, and he'd made no move to leave. He was here to gloat. He was here to feed his ego with the visual evidence of her destitution, to confirm his own self-serving narrative that she was utterly broken without his money and status. His new 25-year-old companion, Blair Thompson, an aggressively curated Instagram model, was likely downstairs in his new black Porsche Panamera, scrolling through photos of herself in Santorini. Carter had made sure Mia saw the relentless performative stream of their life. St. Bart's, Dubai, the new diamond bracelet. "Look what you gave up," the post screamed. "Look how much better my life is now." "A cage," Carter repeated, shaking his head with faux paternal concern. "A gilded cage, darling. Most women would kill for the security I offered. Designer gowns, the prestige, a name that commanded respect in Manhattan. Now you have this." He gestured wildly again, a theatrical sweep that encompassed the worn couch and the easel. "The noble, suffering artist. It's a bit of a cliché, don't you think?" Mia's jaw tightened, but she held the storm at bay. She wanted to list his every cruelty, his every whispered insult that chipped away at her soul, the calculated infidelities that were less about desire and more about control. But she didn't. She knew this was the final test. To show him even a flicker of the old vulnerability was to grant him one last victory. Carter misread her silence as the complete surrender of a beaten woman. A smug, triumphant smile spread across his carefully maintained face. "Look, I know things must be tight," he said, moving toward the counter. "The art market is unforgiving, especially for a newcomer. If you need a little something to tide you over, I could help. Think of it as severance pay." The wallet he reached for was Italian leather, supple and impossibly expensive, a prop in his ultimate act of condescension. Before she could form a rebuttal, her phone, which was lying beside the signed manila envelope, buzzed softly. Mia glanced down at the screen. The message wasn't from Susan, her lawyer, or her gallery. It was from J.C. Architect, 4:12 p.m. Just confirmed the automated skylight installation for the master studio, the perfect northern light. It's going to be incredible. Can't wait to see the look on your face. Home soon. A genuine smile, small and fiercely private, finally touched Mia's lips. It was a smile of profound, almost serene irony. She looked up at Carter, at the insulting cash offer, at his pitying, predatory gaze. The internal screaming was gone, replaced by a crystalline clarity. "No thank you, Carter," she said, her voice clear and firm, the steel beneath the calm finally audible. "I'm doing just fine. Better than fine, in fact." He shrugged, pocketing the wallet, looking genuinely disappointed that his final act of charity had been refused. "All right, suit yourself. Don't say I didn't offer." He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the chipped brass knob. "Good luck with your cozy little life, Mia. Truly." He closed the door, and the sound of his expensive shoes descending the creaky stairs, thump, scrape, groan, was the sound of her past, finally, irreversibly fading away. Mia stood alone in the quiet. She looked around the small space he had found so pathetic. This wasn't her home. This was her sanctuary of strategy, her temporary workshop, the place she had rented 6 months ago to finish the single largest commission of her life, a commission that had changed every variable of her future. She walked over to the covered canvas, the one he had so casually dismissed. With a steady hand, she pulled back the white sheet. Revealed on the massive easel was the cobalt heart, a whirlwind of deep indigo, fiery copper, and brilliant silver leaf, pulsing with kinetic energy. It was a piece about emerging, about finding light after a decade of deliberate darkness. It was the first of 12 panels commissioned by the Holt Global Foundation for the lobby of their new global headquarters. She picked up her phone and typed a reply to J.C. Architect. "Mia Vance, 4:18 p.m. Can't wait either. The view from our new window is definitely better than a brick wall." She hit send. A feeling of delicious, potent anticipation bubbled up inside her chest. Carter Thorne thought he was looking at her final chapter, the tragic end of a failed artist. He had no idea he was only in the preface of her new life, A life that didn't just include a new love, but a penthouse at the very pinnacle of the Eiffel Tower, a structure his own firm had lost the bid on 6 months prior. The irony was so dense she could practically taste the sweet, metallic tang of victory. It hadn't always been a battlefield of subtle cruelty and quiet resentment. Mia remembered the beginning, a decade prior, when Carter Thorne was a force of nature, a whirlwind of charm and ambition. He was a junior partner at a prestigious but old-school real estate investment firm, and she was Mia Vance, a promising young artist, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, her portfolio vibrating with raw, untamed talent. They met at a sprawling gallery opening in Chelsea. Carter, true to form, ignored the art entirely and focused his laser-like attention exclusively on her. He had been captivated, he'd later claimed, by her passion. "You talk about color the way I talk about closing deals," he'd whispered, his breath warm against her ear over expensive champagne. His certainty felt thrilling, infectious. He pursued her relentlessly. He bought one of her smaller paintings, a moody landscape of the Rhode Island coast rendered in brooding blues and greys, a piece now heavy with significance. He hung it prominently in his bachelor pad, a gesture that felt like the ultimate validation. It was, she would later realize, the only piece of her art he would ever truly purchase or value. In the heady, intoxicating blur of new love, she tragically mistook his intensity for devotion. His ambition felt like a rocket she wanted to ride, a path to shared success. When he proposed a year later with a colossal, ostentatious diamond, she said yes, believing they were building two wings of the same empire, his in commerce, hers in creativity. The illusion began to fissure almost immediately after the wedding. Their new home, a magnificent pre-war townhouse on the Upper East Side, was entirely Carter's choice. "It's an investment, Mia. It projects unshakable success," he'd explained, dismissing her hopeful suggestion of a sun-drenched, cavernous loft in Tribeca, a place where she could have established a real working studio. Instead, the attic was designated as her art space. It was a cruel mockery of a studio, poorly lit, perpetually freezing in winter and suffocating in the humid New York summers. When she attempted to rig up proper ventilation and lighting, Carter began his systematic campaign of attrition. "Can we really have clients over with the entire house smelling like a solvent factory?" he'd asked, his tone laced with polite disgust, leaving zero room for debate. Her easel was soon folded away, her oils capped. Her art quickly devolved from a vocation to a hobby, a term he introduced slowly, insidiously, until it became the accepted nomenclature for her life's work. "How's the hobby going?" he'd ask, heading out the door, never waiting for an answer. "You should take a break from your hobby and come to the club with me," he'd suggest, framing the erasure of her passion as a treat, a vacation from triviality. The friends who had been her creative lifeline, her colleagues, her peers, were systematically pruned from their social circle. He found them wanting, lacking the necessary sheen of affluence. Her best friend, a sculptor named Chloe, was dismissed as too loud. Her mentor from RISD, a celebrated abstract expressionist, was labeled a has-been. They were replaced by Carter's world, other finance titans with slicked-back hair and their homogeneous wives, women who only discussed charity committees, competitive schooling, and global vacation spots. Mia found herself trapped in the performance of Mrs. Sterling Thorne. She hosted impeccable, flawless dinner parties. Her name appeared on the right high-profile charity boards. She dressed exclusively in the elegant, muted, and utterly forgettable colors Carter preferred. She was drowning, and the water was made of silk and diamonds. The cage was gilded, just as he'd boasted, but its bars were cold and utterly unyielding. The arguments started small, microscopic irritations that grew into festering wounds. He would forget to tell her about a critical business dinner until an hour before, expecting her to instantly transform into the perfect, smiling hostess. He would criticize her opinions on politics or contemporary art directly in front of his peers, laughing it off as her artistic temperament. The biggest fight, the one that served as the true catalyst for the inevitable rupture, was over a gallery show. An old college friend had opened a small independent space in the East Village and offered Mia a solo exhibition slot. It was the opportunity she had been dreaming of, a chance to reclaim her identity, to put the real Mia Vance back on display. She was ecstatic, working secretly for months in the freezing attic, pouring 10 years of pent-up frustration and suffocated hope onto her canvases. When she finally told Carter, 2 months before the opening, he didn't even bother to look up from his tablet, which was glowing with stock market updates. "An art show. In the East Village," he said, the sheer distaste clear and chilling. "Mia, my clients live on Park Avenue, not St. Mark's Place. What in God's name will people think?" "I don't care what they think," she fired back, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "This isn't for them, Carter. This is for me. This is who I am." He finally lifted his head, his expression instantly becoming a mask of terrifying, icy control. "Who you are is my wife, and my wife does not have a little art show in some dingy downtown gallery. It's embarrassing. It makes us look desperate." "Cancel it," he commanded. "No." It was the first flat refusal she had ever given him on anything remotely significant. He stood up, his 6-foot frame suddenly menacing, towering over her. "You are throwing away everything I've built for us. For this childish need for attention. Your little paintings are a liability. Your selfishness is going to damage my reputation." "Your reputation?" she screamed back, her own voice rising into the rafters. "What about my life, my dreams? The ones you've slowly suffocated for a decade. This isn't about your reputation, Carter. It's about your control. You can't stand the thought of me having something that is purely mine, something you can't put a price tag on or use to impress your friends." He didn't yell. He did something far worse, something more psychologically damaging. He laughed. It was the same hollow, dismissive sound she had just heard in her Bleecker Street studio. "My God, you're delusional," he said, shaking his head with pity. "You genuinely think you're some undiscovered master. You're a housewife with a hobby, Mia. Without me, what are you? You'd be living in a dump, just like that gallery you're so excited about." That was the moment the marriage died. It wasn't a slow, tragic fade. It was a sudden, violent death, leaving a cold, empty void where her love and hope used to reside. She saw him clearly for the very first time, a deeply insecure man whose entire identity was a fragile construct built solely on external validation, money, status, and a beautiful, perfectly compliant wife. Her independence wasn't an inconvenience. It was a mortal threat to his very existence. She went ahead with the show. Carter did not attend. His pointed absence was a public statement, a humiliation noted by everyone in their suffocating social circle. The show was a modest but vital success. She sold a few pieces, received a positive if brief mention in a local art blog, and, most importantly, felt the spark of her old creative self flicker back to vibrant life. It was enough. A week after the show closed, she told him she wanted a divorce. He was first stunned, then immediately enraged. He couldn't possibly comprehend why she would choose to abandon the perfect life he had provided. The divorce was brutal, a scorched earth campaign. His high-priced lawyers attempted to paint her as unstable, ungrateful, and financially dependent. His goal was clear: to leave her with as little as possible, to force her to inevitably crawl back to the security of his wealth. But Mia, unknowingly, had an ace up her sleeve. The small paintings he'd allowed her to keep, her premarital artworks, had held their own value. In his crushing arrogance, he had entirely dismissed the monetary worth of her early pieces. He hadn't realized that her mentor, the one he had cruelly labeled a has-been, had quietly been buying her pieces under a pseudonym for years, always believing in her latent talent. She sold them, securing just enough seed capital to live modestly and rent the Bleecker Street studio while she rebuilt her entire career from the ground up. Leaving the magnificent townhouse for the last time, carrying only her personal belongings and her canvases, was the most terrifying and simultaneously liberating day of her life. Carter's parting words echoed in her ears, a sneering promise. "You'll be back. You'll come crawling back when you realize the real world doesn't care about your little paintings." Now, standing in the studio he had just mocked, she thought about those words. He was wrong. The real world, it turned out, was just waiting to see what she could do. And one very important person in that world had not only cared about her paintings, but had seen his own soul reflected in their turbulent beauty. 6 months into her new solitary life, Mia Vance was a study in controlled, exhilarating chaos. Her days were a relentless cycle: cheap, strong black coffee, brutally long hours, and the exhilarating, unfiltered freedom of creation. The Bleecker Street studio, cramped, drafty, smelling powerfully of linseed oil and hope, was her self-made cocoon. She poured every ounce of her pain, the decade of suppressed anger, and the nascent, soaring hope of her post-divorce existence onto the canvases. Her style had undergone a transformation he could never have conceived. It was no longer the moody, internalized art of her early career. It had become abstract, kinetic, infused with a raw, undeniable emotional power that had been suppressed by Carter's conformity for 10 long years. She was finally painting solely for herself, and the work had never been more fiercely honest. She managed to support herself with small, dedicated online sales and minor commissions, enough to pay the steep rent and buy the increasingly expensive professional supplies she craved. It was a million miles away from the limitless access of the corporate black card she once held, but every single dollar was earned through her own grit and undeniable talent. The opportunity of a lifetime arrived via a single, unassuming email with a subject line that made her heart momentarily stop. Subject: Commission Inquiry, the Holt Global Foundation. Everyone in Manhattan knew the name Julian Holt. He was a genuine titan of the new technology industry, a self-made billionaire who had fundamentally revolutionized sustainable energy and urban planning. Unlike the old money establishment Carter revered, Holt was seen as a true visionary, a quiet futurist. He was also notoriously private, a stark, profound contrast to Carter's relentless, vulgar social climbing. His philanthropic arm, the Holt Global Foundation, was renowned for its massive, impactful investments in both the sciences and the contemporary arts. The email was from his foundation's art director, a brilliant, no-nonsense woman named Anna Sharma. Anna had improbably seen Mia's work at that small, independent East Village gallery show, the very show that had marked the beginning of the end of her marriage. Anna had been quietly tracking her progress ever since, following her small, dedicated online presence. The foundation was searching for a single, ambitious artist to create a massive multi-panel installation for the triple-height lobby of their new global headquarters, a stunning, cutting-edge architectural marvel on the Hudson Yards skyline called the Eiffel Tower. They required a statement piece, a profound visual essay that represented renewal, innovation, and the powerful resilience of the human spirit. They wanted her. The initial meeting was held not in a glass and steel boardroom but, at Mia's insistence, in the humble, cramped Bleecker Street studio. Anna Sharma arrived first, a chic, intelligent woman who spoke of Mia's work with an infectious, intellectual reverence that made Mia genuinely blush. Then, exactly 5 minutes later, Julian Holt himself walked through the door. He was nothing like the swaggering figures of Carter's world. There was no entourage, no aura of manufactured arrogance. He was tall, dressed simply in a beautifully tailored grey cashmere sweater and dark jeans, but he possessed an aura of quiet, unshakable confidence. His eyes, a warm, focused hazel, held a deep and genuine curiosity as he slowly surveyed her studio, not with judgment, but with profound respect. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice deeper and more resonant than she'd imagined, "Anna has been telling me for months that you are the only artist for this project. Seeing your work in person, I finally understand why." He did not look at the second-hand velvet couch or the peeling paint. He looked exclusively at the art. He walked slowly from canvas to canvas, studying them with an intense focus. He asked Mia detailed questions about her technique, her meticulous choice of color pigments, the philosophical meaning behind a particular violent brushstroke. He wasn't just being polite, he was genuinely and intellectually engaged. He saw the complex, painful, yet ultimately victorious story in her work. "There's a profound tension in your pieces," he said, standing before a canvas dominated by stormy, angry greys, pierced dramatically by a single defiant slash of crimson, the painting she called Defiance. "It's like you're fighting your way out of something terribly dark, but you are absolutely certain that the light is there, just beyond the edge." Mia felt a sudden, unexpected lump form in her throat. "That's exactly it," she managed to whisper. In that single profound moment, standing in her tiny, messy studio, she felt more truly seen and understood than she had in her entire decade of marriage to Carter. The commission was hers. The budget was, quite frankly, staggering, far beyond anything she had ever dared to dream. It instantly afforded her the best materials, undeniable financial security, and most importantly, the massive validation of her entire life's work on a prominent global stage. Over the next few months, Julian became an increasingly regular visitor to the studio. He would stop by after work, sometimes with Anna, sometimes alone, to witness the progress of the 12 colossal panels that would make up the Cobalt Heart installation. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, drifting from art theory to global technology trends, from philosophy to their personal pasts. He spoke frankly of his own famously humble beginnings, the son of a librarian and a high school teacher, and the relentless, all-consuming drive it had taken to construct his energy empire. He was fascinated by her raw creative process, seeing striking parallels in the way a painter meticulously builds layers on a canvas and the way a coder meticulously constructs a complex, functioning algorithm. He valued the very qualities Carter had so cruelly belittled. Her passion wasn't a hobby, it was a superpower. Her hard-won independence wasn't selfishness, it was profound strength. The relationship between Mia and Julian deepened, built on a foundation of intellectual respect and shared resilience. Julian never once suggested that she change, or that she stop being the artist who had captivated him. He loved the rough, authentic energy of the Bleecker Street studio, affectionately calling it her creation chamber. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, he found her staring, exhausted but triumphant, at the last finished panel. "It's done," she murmured quietly. "The last one." He stood beside her, looking at the breathtaking 12-panel collection of abstract art that would soon command the attention of thousands of visitors daily. "It's a masterpiece, Mia." He turned to her, his gaze serious, unblinking. "This project is coming to an end, and I find I'm not happy about that." Her heart gave a small, nervous flutter. "Me neither. I've loved working with you." "I'm not just talking about the art," he said softly, stepping closer. "I'm talking about our conversations. I'm talking about you." He was direct, honest, and utterly devoid of the manipulative games Carter had perfected. He told her he was captivated by her quiet fire, her talent, and her unshakable resilience. He hadn't felt such a connection, such a profound sense of shared purpose in years. When he asked if he could take her to dinner, not as a patron but as a man deeply interested in a woman, she accepted without a single moment of hesitation. Their courtship unfolded away from the public, scrutinizing eye. It was a relationship between equals, two people who had built their own unique worlds and now found a profound desire to share them. 3 months later, on a private trip to the Amalfi Coast, he proposed on a secluded balcony overlooking the turquoise sea at sunset. The ring was not a flashy, vulgar rock designed to signal ownership. It was an elegant, custom-designed piece featuring a rare, deep sea-green sapphire that perfectly mirrored her eyes when she laughed. "I don't want to change you, Mia," he vowed, his voice thick with sincere emotion. "I just want to be the one who gets to watch you conquer the world." When they returned to New York, he revealed the ultimate symbol of his devotion, the apartment he had purchased for them. It was the Celestial Suite, the sprawling 3-story duplex penthouse at the very top of the Eiffel Tower, the very building where her magnificent artwork would be displayed in the lobby. It was a palace in the sky, with panoramic unobstructed views of the entire city skyline, a massive private terrace, and, most crucially, a colossal glass-walled room with a soaring ceiling and perfect, consistent northern light. "Your new studio," he declared, gently squeezing her hand. "With a better view than a brick wall," she had whispered, tears of profound relief and gratitude streaming down her face. This was not a cage. This was the launch pad she had been denied. But their newfound reality had to remain hidden. Carter's world and Julian's world were destined to collide, and Mia, strategically, found herself at the epicenter, holding all the silent power. The reason for keeping the dingy Bleecker Street studio and allowing Carter to walk in and mock her perceived failure was rooted in a calculated, precise legal strategy advised by her powerful new lawyer, Susan Kalin. The final, loose legal end that had brought Carter to her door was a lingering tax liability from a failed, speculative real estate venture he had initiated during their marriage, the Northwood Property LLC. Without her complete, informed consent, he had made her a minority partner. When the venture inevitably collapsed, he'd used slick, manipulative accounting to shift the bulk of the subsequent financial losses and tax burdens onto Mia. His entire strategy during the divorce had been to use this debt as leverage, threatening her with a massive IRS liability unless she agreed to a pittance of a settlement, thus ensuring her financial and emotional submission. Susan Kalin, a razor-sharp, no-nonsense partner at the formidable firm of WTIL Lipton, had immediately labeled it financial abuse pure and simple. They had fought it fiercely, but the complexities meant a final resolution was still pending. After Mia secured the 7-figure Holt Global Foundation commission, Susan's advice was chillingly unequivocal. "Do not change your lifestyle, not yet. Carter is watching you. He follows your tiny social media footprint. He has friends who report back to him. He desperately needs to believe you are struggling. Let him. His entire legal case against you is predicated on the idea that you have zero resources. The second he finds out you are connected to Julian Holt, a man he despises and fears, his strategy will pivot. He'll argue you had this relationship before the divorce was final to get a bigger settlement. He will get nastier. Let's starve the beast, Mia. We wait for him to make his final arrogant move based on the false information he has." So, Mia had maintained her quiet, public life. She and Julian became masters of discretion. They dined in highly private rooms, travelled almost exclusively on his personal jet, and spent their shared time either at his heavily secured estate outside the city or within the magnificent, yet still publicly undecorated, Celestial Suite penthouse. To the external, gossiping world, she was still Mia Vance, the struggling artist in a cramped 4th-floor walk-up. The Bleecker Street studio became their strategic asset, a perfectly constructed stage for the final, humiliating act. Julian, to his immense credit, understood the strategic necessity completely. He found a certain intellectual satisfaction in the plan. "He's a bully who relies entirely on the perception of power," Julian had observed one evening, reviewing documents in his temporary library. All we're doing is letting him walk into a room where he thinks he's the giant, without realizing the floor is about to give way entirely. Carter's recent visit, the signing of those documents, his humiliating offer of severance pay, was the move they had been waiting for. It was the perfect, arrogant testament to his hubris, a detail Susan would be delighted to weaponize. Julian had a smaller, more personal surprise for Mia. One evening, in the vast, still empty expanse of the celestial suite, he led her into the room designated as her future studio. In the center, on a professional easel, was a single, small, beautifully framed painting. It was the moody landscape of the Rhode Island coast, the one and only painting Carter had ever bought from her, the symbolic object of their early, doomed romance. "I tracked down the broker he sold it to a few years ago," Julian explained softly. "He unloaded it as part of a package of unwanted assets when he redecorated the townhouse. He probably got a few hundred for it. I believe it belongs here. A reminder of where you started and the talent that was always there, just waiting for the world to finally see it." Tears streamed down Mia's face as she looked from the rescued painting to the man who had brought it back. He hadn't just given her a future. He was helping her reclaim her past. "He thought it was worthless," she whispered, touching the cool glass of the frame. "He was wrong about a lot of things, my love," Julian said, wrapping his strong arms around her. "And he's about to get a masterclass in exactly how wrong he was." The conversation instantly shifted. "Are you ready for this to be over?" Julian asked. "More than anything," Mia replied, the resolve hardening in her eyes. "Then let's finish it," he said. "Susan has everything she needs. But I think there's one more thing we need to do. He came to your space to humiliate you. It seems only fair that the final crushing blow is delivered on your home turf." A final dramatic confrontation, a spectacular moment of karmic justice, was meticulously planned to be staged right back where it all started, the simple fourth-floor walk-up on Bleecker Street. The next 2 weeks were the charged, electric calm before the perfect storm. Mia's legal team, orchestrated by the formidable Susan Kalen, was preparing their bombshell response. Julian's in-house counsel quietly provided all supporting documentation, ironclad contracts, financial audits, and sworn statements. Meanwhile, Carter, utterly oblivious and bloated with confidence from his perceived victory, began to press his advantage. He started with an email dripping with false, oily sympathy. Subject: "Thinking of you, Mia. I can't stop thinking about our conversation. Seeing you in that tiny apartment, it genuinely concerns me. I know you're proud, but pride doesn't pay the bills. The matter of the outstanding tax liability from the Northwood property deal needs to be settled. My lawyers are advising me that, given your current financial situation, the courts will likely see it as my burden to bear, but it will be a long and messy fight that will just cost us both more time and money. I have a proposal. I will assume the full debt, no strings attached. All I ask is that you sign a final waiver acknowledging that this settles all financial matters between us, past, present, and future. It's the clean break we should have had. Let me do this one last thing for you. Think of it as a final act of kindness." Carter Mia read the email aloud to Julian and Susan over a conference call, her voice flat. Susan let out a dry, predatory laugh. "An act of kindness, he calls it. He's trying to trick you into signing away your right to sue him for a pittance. He's terrified that even if you're broke, a pro bono lawyer might take your case and uncover his fraud. He wants to lock you in a box and throw away the key." Julian's voice, coming through the speaker, was cold and razor-sharp. "He's trying to buy a clear conscience for the price of a tax burden he created. It's pathetic. Mia, what's your gut telling you?" "My gut says he needs to sweat," Mia replied, running a hand through the paint-streaked strands of her hair. "We let him simmer," Susan advised. "Do not respond. Your silence will make him nervous. He'll get sloppy. He'll push harder. Susan was precisely right. A full, excruciating week of silence passed. Then came the official aggressive letter from Carter's lawyers, demanding action and setting an impossible deadline. It threatened immediate severe legal action to assign the full debt to Mia, citing her lack of cooperation and her unstable, non-existent financial footing. This was the official move they had been waiting for. Susan's team instantly filed their meticulously prepared counter-motion. The complex legal gears were now turning, but the physical paperwork would take a few days to reach Carter's lead counsel's office. That window, that 3-day gap before his lawyers knew the jig was up, was the precise opportunity they needed. The final piece of the dramatic plan snapped into place when Carter, agitated by Mia's unnerving silence and supremely confident in his impending legal victory, made one final, fatal, arrogant move. He bypassed his own lawyers and sent a text message directly to Mia. Carter Thorne, 11:45 a.m. I'm trying to help you, Mia. I've sent a final offer via my lawyers. If you don't sign it, I'll have no choice but to let them do their job. I'm coming by your studio tomorrow at 3 p.m. with a courier. You can sign it right there, and this can all be over. Don't be foolish. Mia's hands trembled slightly as she read the message. This was it. The public confrontation he was forcing was the very one she and Julian had meticulously planned. He's delivering his own execution order, Julian said grimly when she relayed the text. Are you sure you're ready for this face-to-face, my love? There's no turning back. Mia took a deep, steadying breath, her gaze falling on the small Rhode Island painting, now standing proudly in a place of honor in her future, magnificent studio. She thought of the decade of being made to feel small, of her dreams being dismissed as childish. I'm ready, she declared, her voice filled with a steely, unyielding resolve. He deserves to see my face when his world comes crashing down. He won't get the satisfaction of my tears. He'll get the satisfaction of my smile. The plan was simple. Julian would not be there initially. This had to be her victory, her moment of reclaiming power. He would arrive only at the very end, the ultimate flourish, to serve as the final, unimpeachable witness and to escort her away from the smoking wreckage of her past life for good. The day of the meeting, Mia dressed with purpose but without pretense. She didn't choose a power suit or a designer gown. She wore her paint-splattered jeans, a simple, perfect black t-shirt, and her favorite worn leather boots. She was the artist he had tried to erase, standing in the very studio he despised, wearing the uniform of her freedom. At 2:45 p.m. she sat on the second-hand velvet couch, the room neat, but deliberately still smelling strongly of turpentine, the scent of her honest, hard-won existence. The air was thick with palpable anticipation, the silence a taut string ready to be plucked. She wasn't nervous. She was a conductor, waiting to bring the symphony of consequences to its crashing, inevitable crescendo. At 2:55 p.m. she received the final critical text from Julian. JC, 2:55 p.m. I'm 5 minutes away. The documents were officially filed with the court and served to his lead counsel's office at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. He doesn't know it yet, but he's already lost everything. This is just the epilogue. I love you, Mia. Mia Vance, 2:56 p.m. I love you too. Showtime. Right on cue, exactly at 3 p.m. sharp, she heard the heavy, confident thump, thump, thump of expensive footsteps ascending the creaky staircase. They were quickly followed by a lighter, clicking sound. High heels. The audacity of the man. He had brought company. The knock on the door was sharp, impatient, demanding entry. Mia stood up, smoothed down her t-shirt, and walked slowly to the door. She turned the knob, her heart steady, her mind crystal clear. It was time to let the arrogant ghost of her past in for the very last time. The door swung inward, revealing Carter Thorne in all his bespoke-suited glory. He stood there, a perfectly manicured embodiment of corporate hubris. Beside him, clinging to his arm with the practiced grip of a trophy, was Blair Thompson. She was stunningly, generically beautiful, with impossibly long, bleached blonde hair and a miniature Chanel bag clutched like a weapon. Blair looked at Mia, then around the small, shabby apartment, and her perfectly glossed lips curled instantly into a barely concealed sneer. "Mia," Carter began, his tone magnanimous, as if he were a king graciously visiting a peasant's hovel. "This is Blair. I thought it best to have a witness. And this is Mr. Davies, the courier with the settlement papers." He gestured to a nervous, pale-faced man in a uniform standing a reluctant step behind them. "Come in," Mia said, her voice betraying absolutely nothing. She stepped back, allowing them to crowd into her sacred, strategic space. The room suddenly felt impossibly small, suffocatingly dense with Carter's crushing ego and the aggressive scent of Blair's expensive perfume. Carter placed his heavy leather briefcase on the small coffee table with a decisive, proprietary thud. "Let's make this quick," he said, glancing at his watch. "I have a reservation at Fiancé tonight. Blair has never been." He looked at Blair with a smug, possessive smile. "It's like impossible to get a table," Blair drawled, her high-pitched voice grating against the quiet. She then focused on a small, abstract sketch tacked to the wall. "Wow, my little nephew paints things like that at his daycare. So cute." Mia ignored her, her focus locked entirely on Carter. "Here it is," Carter said, pulling out a thick, legal-sized document. "Simple, straightforward. You sign here, acknowledging you have no further claims against me. I sign here, finally taking on the full Northwood tax debt. The courier notarizes it, and we are done. I'm being incredibly generous, Mia. My lawyers think I'm insane to offer this." He slid the document across the chipped table toward her. "Don't overthink it. It's the best deal you're ever going to get. It's your lifeline. Take it." Mia did not look at the papers. She looked directly into Carter's cold, triumphant eyes. "Generous, Carter? Is that what you call it? Saddling your ex-wife with a massive debt you fraudulently created, then offering to take it back in exchange for legal immunity?" Carter's smile faltered, a single second of visible panic. "Let's not get into semantics. This is a simple business transaction, Mia." "No," Mia said, her voice rising in strength, the sound now clear and ringing in the small room. "Let's, Carter, let's talk about the hobby, my art. You called it a delusional pipe dream. You said I'd come crawling back. You stood in this very room and laughed at my cozy little life." "I was trying to be realistic," he stammered, growing visibly defensive. "No, you were being cruel," she shot back, leaning forward. "And you were being blind. You have always been blind, Carter. You only see price tags. You have no concept of true, inherent value." Blair looked nervously between them, gripping Carter's arm tighter. "Mark, maybe we should just go." "Stay," Mia commanded, her gaze never leaving Carter. "She should hear this. She's your next cautionary tale." Carter let out an exasperated sigh, a theatrical display of being inconvenienced by a woman's drama. "What is the point of this, Mia? Are you going to throw a tantrum, refuse to sign? Who do you think that hurts? It only hurts you. You have nothing, no assets, no income to speak of. Any court in the country will side with me. Now sign the paper and let me leave." This was the moment, the peak of his arrogance, the final damning statement that sealed his fate. Mia smiled, a slow, brilliant, victorious smile that lit up the dimly lit room. "It's funny you should mention courts, Carter." She pulled out her phone and placed it gently on the table between them. She tapped the screen. The small, cramped apartment was instantly filled with a voice, deep, clear, and immensely authoritative, coming from a speakerphone call she had just answered. "Hi, honey," the voice said. "Just wanted to let you know I'm downstairs on Bleecker. Also, Anna just called. The lighting test for your installation, the Cobalt Heart, in the lobby of the Ethel Tower, was a resounding success. It looks magnificent, and the final payment from the foundation, the 7-figure one, should be hitting your account tomorrow morning." Carter froze instantly. His face went pale, draining of all color. He stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Blair's jaw dropped, her expensive perfume suddenly smelling cheap. "Who? Who is that?" Carter stammered, his voice thin and cracking. Mia's smile widened, transforming her face into one of pure, unadulterated power. "Oh, that's Julian Holt," she said sweetly. "And speaking of courts, Carter." "Mine, a woman named Susan Kalen from W-Tel Lipton. You may have heard of them. They're a significant step up from your regional firm. Filed a counter-motion this afternoon. It details my entire income from the Holt Global Foundation Commission for the past 6 months. It also includes a formal motion to sue you for financial abuse and fraud. I imagine your lawyer's email is pinging right about now." Carter looked utterly, completely bewildered, unable to process the overload of information. "Holt? The Julian Holt? What are you talking about?" As if on cue, there was a quiet, almost imperceptible knock on the doorframe. Julian Holt stepped inside. He was not dressed for per se. He was in a casual, impeccably tailored jacket, and his warm hazel eyes were fixed on Carter with an expression of cold, controlled fury. The courier's eyes went wide with instant recognition. Blair let out a small, terrified gasp, immediately recognizing the famously private billionaire from gossip columns. Carter stared, his mind visibly short-circuiting as he frantically tried to connect the impossible dots. The voice on the phone, the man in the doorway, the Holt Foundation, the Ethel Tower, his firm's humiliating lost bid. "You," he whispered, looking at Mia with a dawning, shattering horror. He could not form a complete sentence. Julian walked calmly into the room and stood possessively beside Mia, placing a strong, protective hand on her shoulder. He looked down at Carter, who was still seated, looking suddenly small, insignificant, and utterly pathetic. "Thorne," Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet, cutting through the heavy silence. "You came into my fiancé's studio to intimidate her. You mocked her life's work. That work now adorns the lobby of my global headquarters. You tried to saddle her with a fraudulent debt. My legal team, the best in the world, is going to dismantle you for that, not just for the fraud, but for the harassment." Julian then glanced at the settlement papers lying innocently on the table. He picked up the thick legal document, not even reading the toxic contents, and tore the entire sheaf of paper perfectly in half with one clean, resounding rip. He dropped the shredded pieces onto the floor at Carter's feet. "This negotiation is over," Julian stated, his voice final. Carter was speechless. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water, but no sound would come out. His entire world, built solely on a fragile foundation of perceived superiority and financial control, had just been leveled by a quiet woman in paint-stained jeans and the one man in New York he could never in a million years compete with. Blair, seeing the monumental shift in power, began backing rapidly toward the door, her face a mixture of terror and sudden, cold calculation. I should go. I'll get an Uber." She practically fled, abandoning Carter alone in the ruins of his confidence. Mia looked at her ex-husband, not with hate, but with a strange, detached pity. He wasn't a monster. He was just a hollow, desperately insecure man. "The view from my new studio is much better than the one from the townhouse, Carter," she said softly, leaning into Julian's embrace. "You can see the whole city up there. You look so small from that height." She then turned, took Julian's hand, and without a single backward glance, walked out of the Bleecker Street studio for the last time. She left Carter sitting there amidst the torn papers of his generous offer, the ghost of his own monumental arrogance haunting the tiny, miserable room he had so thoroughly misjudged. The aftermath of the Bleecker Street showdown was not swift. The legal system demanded its timeline, but it was absolutely, meticulously total. Carter Thorne's world did not just crack, it began to atomize from the inside out. The lawsuit Mia filed was a masterpiece of legal devastation. Susan Kalin and Julian's in-house counsel worked in perfectly synchronized tandem, unearthing every shady deal, every shell corporation, and every instance where Carter had leveraged Mia's name, credit, and perceived passivity without her full consent. The Northwood property tax fraud was merely the visible tip of an enormous corrupted iceberg. Faced with overwhelming, irrefutable evidence and the catastrophic prospect of a public trial against a globally revered billionaire and his newly famous artist fiancé, Carter's once swaggering lawyers immediately advised him to settle. He was financially, utterly obliterated. He was forced to sell the sprawling, magnificent Upper East Side townhouse, the investment he had used to cage Mia, to cover the monumental legal fees and the massive settlement he was compelled to pay to Mia. In a final act of pure moral reclamation, Mia immediately donated the entire settlement in its entirety to the Vance Holt Fund for Emerging Female Artists, a new charity designed to give financial security and studio space to women trying to break free of financial dependence. Carter lost his prized Porsche Panamera, his memberships to exclusive Manhattan clubs, and, most crucially, his standing in the high-stakes real estate community. News of his fraudulent dealings, his relentless financial abuse of his ex-wife, and his public, humiliating collapse at the hands of Julian Holt and Mia Vance spread like wildfire through the elite circles he had fought so hard to dominate. He was no longer a feared player. He became an instant, viral cautionary tale, a punchline at every charity gala and private dinner party. The final definitive blow came when Thorn Global Real Estate, desperate to distance themselves from the catastrophic scandal, unilaterally terminated his partnership. He was unceremoniously escorted from the building he had helped construct, leaving behind a career that had been the sole pillar of his identity. Blair Thompson, of course, was long gone. Her social media feed instantly pivoted from glossy shots with Carter in Monaco to vague inspirational quotes about cutting out negative energy and finding your own light. Carter Thorne, the man who had fanatically defined himself by external success, status and control, was left with absolutely nothing but the stark, unvarnished truth of his own character. Mia never saw him again. She didn't need to. Her focus was entirely, joyfully, on the future she was actively constructing. The Bleecker Street studio, having served its strategic purpose, was quietly vacated. Mia left behind only a pristine, empty shell, a final symbolic erasure of the past life. 6 months after that decisive final confrontation, the Eiffel Tower held its grand opening gala. The event was the undisputed talk of New York society, a collision of technology, finance, and high culture. At the heart of the soaring, triple-height, cathedral-like lobby was Mia Vance's installation, The Cobalt Heart. The 12 massive panels were a symphony of color and emotion, alive under the meticulously designed, custom-programmed lights that Julian's team had installed. They were universally acclaimed. The New York Times called the installation a monolith of optimism, a monumental work of breathtaking power and resilience, and hailed Mia Vance as a major new voice in contemporary American art. That evening, Mia stood on the private terrace of the Celestial Suite, high up at the pinnacle of the tower, looking down at the glittering, humming city she had conquered. She wore a stunning, custom-made sea-green silk gown that perfectly matched her engagement ring, and Julian was by her side, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. They weren't looking at the throng of partygoers below or the press angling for a better shot. They were looking at the art, her art, which was now a permanent, powerful feature of the skyline. "Do you remember what you told me the first time you came to my studio?" Mia asked him, her voice soft over the distant murmur of the exclusive crowd. "You said my work looked like I was fighting my way out of the dark, but certain the light was there." "I remember," Julian confirmed, his eyes full of love and unshakable pride. "And look at you now. You're not just in the light, my love. You're creating it for everyone else to see." She leaned her head on his shoulder, a feeling of profound, complete peace settling over her. Her happiness was not about the 7-figure checks or the public acclaim. It wasn't even, ultimately, about Carter's spectacular downfall. It was about this quiet, profound connection, being seen, being valued, and being loved for exactly who she was. The intense, passionate artist who spoke of color like he spoke of code. The penthouse, the acclaim, the absolute financial security, they were not the prize itself. They were the wonderful, beautiful byproducts of her reclaiming her own soul. Carter had tried to lock her in a gilded cage. She had instead built a palace in the sky. She turned to look into the glass-walled studio behind them. There, on a simple antique writing desk, stood the small, framed Rhode Island painting. The muted greys and blues of the canvas were bathed in the soft, perfect northern light streaming through the massive automated skylight. The light transformed the once brooding landscape into something quietly hopeful. She was no longer Mia Sterling Thorne, the accessory. She was Mia Vance, the woman who had learned that true wealth was not something you could desperately own, but something you had to fearlessly become. Mia's story is not just a tale of sweet public revenge. It's a powerful reminder that the greatest success is living authentically. Carter saw her life through the limiting lens of money and status, and it made him tragically blind. Julian saw her through the lens of passion and character, and it showed him everything. In the end, the simple apartment Carter mocked was the very stage where Mia forged the weapons of her victory. Her art, her resilience, and her self-worth. She didn't need to tear him down. His own colossal arrogance did the work for her. She just had to rise. If you were moved by this spectacular tale of empowerment and justice, please hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories of ultimate karma.